Dear Jeb, I hope you are doing well. I think I have talked about consistency enough now, so this episode I'm going to do something I don't normally do and hone in on some specific game features. These are features that exist but don't really have much depth to them. You might have heard me talk about the word depth quite a lot. Extra Credits talks about it beautifully in a video called Depth versus Complexity: Why More Features Don't Make a Better Game.
Basically, it is the designer's job to get the maximum amount of depth out of the minimum amount of complexity. Depth is simply the number of emergent, experientially different possibilities or meaningful choices that come out of one rule set.
Something tells me, Jeb, that you already know this. You said in an interview that you deliberately withhold content to stop new players from being overwhelmed. I agree. I agree that we need to design features in a way that doesn't overwhelm new or returning players, because that's already a problem. But on the other side of the spectrum, there are elite players who know every single in and out of the game who are getting bored with the lack of new content. Therefore, most things I suggest are small, add consistency, there's that word again, and cater towards both new and old players. I admit they're incredibly safe suggestions that don't drastically change the game or attract much controversy, but I think safe is good for a game this large scale. I believe one of the issues with some of the latest updates, namely 1.10, is that complexity has been added, but only a small amount of depth. It's cool to see polar bears spawning in the world, and I do believe more ambient mobs should be in the game like bats, but with the amount of time it probably took to make the polar bear, I think more could have been added to it. Depth and complexity aren't the only parts of the equation. It's also a time concern. If you spend hours and hours on one feature and you have a small development team, that feature needs to be a worthwhile addition. And by worthwhile, I mean, how many hours of content are you adding to the game? How long will it take before the niche of a polar bear wears off? I don't know what happens at the Mojang offices, but for all we know, that polar bear could have taken only 3 hours to add, but I think it's reasonable to assume you spent quite a bit of time implementing this feature. And if that's true, it should have more to it. Maybe it could scare passive mobs away. Maybe it could drop a polar bear hide in a similar way rabbits drop their hide and can be used to make leather. Maybe it could go towards water and pull fish out of the water, kind of like farmers harvesting crops. These are tiny additions that would have added more depth, but not a lot of complexity. Now, I'm not saying that every single feature needs to be super deep and have tons of uses, but I am saying is if you're going to spend a long time on a feature, it should mean more to the players to have it in the game. This is why you'll never hear me complain about husks and strays being in the game. They don't add much complexity, and I can't imagine they would have taken the same amount of time to add as the polar bear. Therefore, I don't believe they are in need of much uniqueness. For the polar bear, however, it's a different story. Let's compare these mobs to the Enderman. Like polar bears, Endermen are quite complex mobs with strange behavior. They teleport, they are aggressive when looked at, they hate water, they are 3 blocks tall. This is complex behavior. However, they add a ton of depth to the game. They are the gateway to the wealth of new content that is the end. They drop pearls which let you teleport. They make ender chests, they make ender crystals. There is a lot to this creature, and therefore, it's a worthwhile addition.
Hi, this is Game Maker's Toolkit. I'm Mark Brown. So let me introduce you to Downwell, and it's also one of the most elegantly designed games I've played in a long time. And the reason I say that is because almost everything in the game serves 2 or even 3 purposes. A good idea is something that does not solve just one single problem, but rather can solve multiple problems at once.
Polar bears, however, they are aggressive when attacked or have a baby. They spawn rarely in snow biomes, and they drop fish.
There's no real benefit to keeping them in captivity besides you want a cute pet, and they're, again, such a unique mob in that way. Like, every other mob in the game seems to have some grand function, but the polar bear doesn't. Like, it'll attack you if you go near it, and that makes, ice biomes a little scarier, and they'll give you fish if you kill them, so that means they have some use in killing them. But in terms of just their actual place in the game, you can't have a farm of them, you can't really do too much of them, they just kind of exist and are big and kind of interesting in that way.
I see what you're saying, IBX Toy Cat. But considering how much time this polar bear might have taken to create, do you not think that they might not be able to have some kind of other use which will make them better for the survival community. So let me ask you this, how many YouTube videos have you seen since the release of 1.11 containing polar bears? How many videos contained wither skeletons? How many contained guardians? I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but I'll restate my point again. Features that take a long time to make and add lots of complexity should have more depth to keep the players engaged. Again, not everything needs depth, as I said with husks, strays, igloos, or magma blocks even. It would just be nice to see these new mobs you spent a long time implementing get more love from the players you gave them to.